two, one. We are live.
Hello, listeners. You are with Natalie on the Launch No Code podcast. Today, I have with me Carri, Craver, who is coming to talk to us about all things no code related, from launching, from building back end to front end product design. Carri has a wealth of knowledge in the industry. So, first of all, hi, Carri. How are you?
Hi, Natalie. I'm delighted to get to be here today.
It's so great to have you here. And, just like every other guest that I have on this podcast, the first thing I want to ask you is really about your no code story. How did you find yourself in this community or space that we call no code?
Oh, yeah. Um, so, gosh, this is something that I knew was coming and I've been waiting for years. Because I have been a designer in tech, and I've always been prolific with ideas and always wanting to execute things and working to try to do that on my own. And so I would say for at least a decade, I've been testing out different tools every week, or certainly every month, trying to find the things that I could execute more complicated websites in. And so I started spending pretty much every day in no code tools maybe 2 years ago. I think I tried out Webflow and Airtable maybe 4 years ago, but they didn't become a daily habit until the last couple of years. I'd even done, I remember a Kickstarter for a product called Macaw, a design product that I thought was going to be able to get me to launch some sites. So I've been using tools for years, trying to wait for this phase. So I'm really delighted that the execution it's now there. Like, it's really been certainly the last year for me has been amazing.
Amazing. I mean, a decade, Carri, that's a long time to be sort of testing out these sorts of tools from the beginning. And now you're using them daily. I mean, 10 years ago, what kind of tools were you using back then? I mean, even if they weren't what we imagine now, what sort of things?
Yeah, I mean, so this was more just always seeking what was out there. I mean, my design tools that I used every day back then it was probably Fireworks 10 years ago. Adobe Fireworks. But I started using Macromedia back in the late 90s. So I've been using design tools on a daily basis for 20 years, and focusing on design since then. But really, it's interesting. I am a designer, and I do call myself that. But my focus has always been in trying to help execute products. Really, that's what I love most, is that whole business thinking and strategy. So I don't think I'm necessarily as good at that as I am at user experience design, but and probably the reason I'm best at user experience design is I love talking to people and I love seeing how people do things. And it is wild how differently people will look at the same thing, and then their expectations, their thoughts. And so I think some of the years that I spent in usability, just doing usability testing all the time, really made me good at user experience. But but anyway, back to the tools. So, I mean, I was always using stuff all over the place. So UX Pen was one of the earlier prototyping tools that was excellent. I used proto.io for a while. I would love to see if I had a list of all the products I've ever paid a monthly fee for. I can't even imagine. But I used Sketch back when I think it was Sketch 2 when I switched to that. So Sketch and Figma are now really the tools of the day for designers. But for me, it's been nice to move on from those to Webflow and Softer and Card and UMSO. UMSO is one of my favorites, but something that maybe doesn't get as much discussion in the no-code community.
Wow. I mean, that's a lot of tools that you've used over the years. And I think I'm a little bit of a tool addict myself. I think my sort of obsession became with CRMs very early, years ago, and got being obsessed around how do we really get to understand our customers and understand those very specific traits about them. And I think that's what actually drew me towards you, Carri, because I didn't actually find you as a product designer or as a product person or as any form of designer I came across your profile on Twitter, CC Girl, when I was thinking more about databasing. And you seem to be, actually really quite good at explaining databases and Airtable and things like that. So, I mean, were you aware that you had this sort of skill as well as your design?
Well, thank you for the kind words, but yeah, I've certainly been very comfortable with structuring data, and there was even a phase where I used to write SQL maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago, some. So I definitely have a high comfort level, and I think you have to, as a good user experience designer, understand how you need your data structured if you're going to be working with it yourself. And so I think that's something that maybe with my design background, I'm a little more comfortable than a lot of people leaping to, either Airtable or Xano, or even Integromat and Parabola to be able to start structuring and doing things with your data. But I think because I've spent so much time thinking about and being told no from developers when I'm on teams for that I'm not allowed to do certain ways of organizing my data because of the way that things were structured, and that we wouldn't have time to change things and reorder the database. And so, I've been having these conversations with developers for years when I would get to be involved in the conversations when projects were early on. And I would say things like, well, let me do some deep dives with how the data will be best organized for users to see things, for people to kind of see things structured together and understand it. And I think because I had those conversations a number of times throughout the years and knew that the way it's set up in the beginning impacts the way you're allowed to show things easily, I knew it was important. And so, yeah.
I mean, that's so interesting, because what you're sort of saying from there, it was actually almost like we need to have a bit more of a holistic team involved in the way that we structure databases and the architecture of databases right at that beginning. And I almost feel a little bit similar to you in that sense, because a lot of the time when I'm working from a marketing perspective with products and I'm looking to track certain metrics or look at certain triggers within databases, and that data's not there, and I sort of am questioning, like, how do we actually get that data in there if it wasn't built in there to start with? So my question for you, Carri, is do you think we actually need more holistic skills around the database architecture moving forwards?
Yeah, I mean, it's always good if the team can come together early and listen to the different stakeholders who are going to be using that data, and let them at least voice the things that are going to be most important to them, the things that are going to let them do their jobs well. If the person designing the database doesn't understand those things, they're going to have oversights, or even bigger than that, they may build in some structural problems to how things are going to work. But honestly, the user experience designers throughout the years, they weren't included in those conversations. They weren't invited to those conversations and willingly brought in. But yeah, I've mainly worked for startups, and I can definitely be assertive and say, I'd like to be part of that conversation. I have some things that may influence the way I would like to see the data organized so that we can best show it to users. And sometimes I would get to be part of that conversation and in that room then, and sometimes I wouldn't. But it's I think it's something it's pretty different now. I mean, 20 years ago, I wasn't even called a user experience designer, and design was considered decorative. But we've obviously moved on from that. But I'm not sure that developers feel comfortable having designers say things like the conversation we were having on Twitter, where I was showing, right now I'm working on a product where I want to recommend products to people. And I wanted to have a list of features, and then each product that is best in class for that. So for instance, full custom design. I want to put Webflow as the best product for that. So I'm, in Airtable, you pull it and you look up another record, and I'm just making it so I can only have one in that column. But then I have another column right next to it of data, and it says has the feature. And so that's going to have 25, 30 products, possibly, depending on what the feature is.
So you've got almost that one-to-one relationship and also the one-to-many relationship that you sort of built in depending on what the input. Yeah. It's interesting that you mentioned about that sort of, do developers feel comfortable? Do we feel comfortable as marketers to actually take on advice from developers, and do product owners feel comfortable with taking advice from marketers and developers? And I think it's very much dependent on who you work with. And I think we're learning more and more the kind of crossover of skills that people have between each department as well. I mean, you kind of brushed over SQL, like that was not a big deal to just have in your repertoire of skills, but that's not something that someone would typically associate with a product person, is it? Or I don't know, you tell me.
No, I mean, most UX designers have not written SQL. And that was something I probably did for, I don't know, a year. So it wasn't a lengthy period of time, and it wasn't recently. But it's something I'm comfortable. I mean, learning SQL didn't seem out of my league. I also used to write front-end code, so just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But once you started having to do media queries to have responsive design, so you couldn't just slice the page up and design one screen size, I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on design instead of coding as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great to have like a dip into all of those skills, because I think it gives us that ability to have conversations across departments. So I've actually done a SQL course myself as well, and that's where I kind of learned my fundamentals around databases and things. But a standard Udemy course that I did there, where I practiced and used sort of NoSQL and all sorts of things like that. So, but then that allows me as a marketer to have better conversations with development teams, because
absolutely,
as much as we want to think about programmers and developers as knowing all and being able to create the best products, they are human beings as well. Like these people that can program, that can do code, they are also human beings. And, diversity of mindsets is what's going to bring us together to create amazing products. That's just my sort of 2 cents around that.
Yeah. The structure of a team and how they work together is really interesting to me. So, I love to work on small teams that are highly prolific and that work together well. But getting those things in sync, it's there's a lot of ego in startups. And I would say it can be stressful when maybe people want to be involved in conversations and don't get to, or you're trying to move really fast with hard deadlines, like conventions or something you want to release features for, things like that. And I don't know, it's the startup team environment can be really fun and really difficult.
So it sounds like you've had a bit of experience working within startup teams. Is this mainly from your product UX side, or have you implemented any no-code stuff yet into startups? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so I've always been when I'm hired by somebody else, I've always been a UX designer on the team, product person. So I guess I've been product manager and UX designer, back and forth between those two roles over and over. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I want to create my own products, and I've just started having some success with that with the COVID site that I launched in January, and I just a couple of days ago noticed I still had 15,000 visitors come to the site in March, and I'd forgotten about the site entirely. I didn't realize anybody was still going to it until I was looking at something else and I saw the stats for that, and I was like, what site is this that I'm getting 15,000 people?
So for the benefits of our listeners, please enlighten us. Tell us a little bit more about this idea that you had related to the COVID website.
Yeah, so it was pretty simple. My dad wanted to get the shot. The state of Texas had a terrible website for finding out where to go find the COVID vaccine. very little information about how to actually make that happen. And so I had just listened to a Planet Money podcast from a guy in Taipei who had done a crowdsourcing site for the information to buy masks when MERS or SARS or something hit there. And I thought, well, I can definitely, with Webflow and Airtable, create a site that people can crowdsource the information and pull, and I can pull in the location data from the Texas site. And so I did that. A couple of people helped me out getting the data. I'm not real good at scraping data and figuring out how to get those tools to work. I've tried Octoparse and a few others, and I gave up. But yeah, I put that out there, and then people started using it right away. And I went on the local news because I wanted people in that 65 and over category to find out about it. And I knew they're not following me on Twitter, listening to me talk about design. So I got on a couple of local news shows in Texas, and then I got some national media as well. So, but now the CDC finally created a site, so I just forward everybody from my site to theirs because that's the most helpful information. So that was my biggest success so far in building a product that got any traction.
Yeah, I was going to say that's some serious traction. And what have you learned from that, do you think, in terms of the success from it?
Yeah, I've learned if you could pick a topic that is timely and life and death and build a site to help people in that category, getting attention is not a problem. And that really is my big weakness is I love to build. I just don't love to market. And so for me, this was way unexpected. I thought I would get, maybe help out a few dozen or a couple hundred people. And my main goal was to have somebody tell me where to tell my dad to go to get the site. Like that was the underlying reason I built it, is so I wouldn't have to help him call pharmacies or, that kind of stuff. It would just be a pain.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, building on trends is a marketing product strategy, like building related to trends in the market. I mean, I don't know if you're familiar with Bad Unicorn and the guys behind that. Yeah, so they're a product house. They launch small products every Friday, but they focus on the trends, which means that's how they leverage their marketing. They just follow the trend because there's already getting traction within that trend, and that is a type of marketing. And you effectively did that. So I now have a question, which is slightly different, is you are now funneling users or viewers from your website to a government website. Is this something that you are monetizing? Is this something that you are doing out of the good of your heart? Is it something that you have sponsorship for? How's the monetization of that stuff working?
Yeah, again, big weakness for me. I'm not great with, I have not been really successful in creating business models around the products I create. I spend more time focusing on building than I do. And this one, my goal was not to make money. My goal was this audience, it was terrible what the state of Texas did for people. I wanted to just help anybody I could with this one. And I mean, it cost me $100 maybe to run it so far. I mean, that was worth, but I did at one point have a donation button on the site. And I think I got maybe $850. So I made some money from that.
Yeah, so I kind of like to reflect, because I'm finding this with a few no-code makers. I'd like to kind of reflect this back at you now, is that the government who are running these, they have grants and funding to run their teams, to pay the people that are putting up their websites and running their campaigns, correct?
I have no idea this was the CDC site that now actually helps people. I assume CDC employees created that website. And I don't know if they hired an agency. It's a good site. So this is terrible. I assume that somebody working for the government didn't create it, because it went up pretty quickly after the Biden administration was in office. and it's good. So I assume they hired an agency and they built it.
Yeah. So, I mean, just another way of looking at it would be to think of, I wonder if there was some funded related to that you could have a cut of the funding if it was government sponsored. You're providing a valuable service and you are directing and signposting, and that is of value. And I think it's just quite interesting to kind of talk about how we actually, from a mindset perspective, think about this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I didn't think of that. I definitely didn't consider that there was any funding possibility for the site as it is today.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
I'd love to see that. I mean, can you share the URL? Is it still up?
Yeah, it is. It's findvaccineusa.com. And
is the donate button still up there?
Nope. I took that off. I took that off when I started working with Oracle because they helped me build a national version of the site. It didn't get launched very soon before the CDC launched their site. Oracle's a big company and moving, they're not going to build the site in 2 or 3 days. As I was able to do. So I did add it to, gotcha. Okay. But yeah, I like the idea of going back and revisiting how to monetize that. Well, and another thing is at the beginning, I was going to start sending email and text notifications when it became clear exactly where to go to get the site at locations. And I think I ended up collecting about 20,000 text phone numbers and emails from people who said they wanted to be notified. And so that's just sitting in an Airtable as well. So
wow.
I felt like that was probably the most valuable thing I collected, but I also don't necessarily want to spam that group. So
of course. And it's kind of, and maybe sort of our learnings are that actually having a business goal in mind when we build products, maybe that's like a really important thing.
Yeah, if I considered that before collecting those things and have made it about the fact that I'm going to notify them of this, but also like I'm doing something for that, I don't know, some product around that would have been a really great idea. But yeah, I'll be more thoughtful next time I find something that's this timely.
But you have done such an amazing thing though, to be able to create a product and a campaign that has even driven you to acquire that much data. Like there are some people that only dream of doing that. And, I think we should celebrate your success from being able to, get people to give their data. It is a personal possession. It is something that is personal to them. And they have offered that to you because that's truly how much value they thought that you were providing in your product.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, hands up to you for that. That was awesome.
And in all my years of working on things like this, I've never seen such clean data. It's like these people actually want me to email them and text them. So, in other products for startups, I've certainly looked at how our forms, the quality of the data coming in, it's never been that good. So have you
thought about just messaging them to just give them an update on the status of your website or thank them or anything like that?
I haven't taken any actions. I've given it cursory thought, but I'm not good at everything. This is not my comfort zone. It's not my understanding. I'm not a marketer. I would love to figure out how I could start to become one, but a lot of marketing makes me uncomfortable. It shuts down my creativity. It exhausts me. It does kind of the opposite of what building does for me. I start building and I am just excited that I can build all day. I start doing marketing tasks and I'm like, oh God, I'm going to bother these people and they're not going to buy anything. And then I'm going to feel bad that I'm not selling. And it's just this like cycle of not good thought processes. So yeah, I mean, I want to find a partner who is a marketer who is excited to ask me these questions and figure out like, so we can do something together. So yeah, because I don't think I'm going to overcome.
Yeah, And I think, if we look at a lot of partnerships, there's often a builder and there's often a marketer. And the thing is that, like, the marketers, you see them, the Elon Musk, the Steve Jobs, those sort of people you see in the spotlight, they do have builders behind them, though. They are not one-person bands. As much as they are in the limelight, they all have builders behind them doing all the hard work. So let's talk a little bit more about your builds and your favorite things to build, because I'm really interested to kind of explore more of the today's tools. So let's talk about some specific categories. I mean, what about like web apps at the minute? I know you've done a little bit around playing with web apps. Is there any particular tools that you're loving or hating, or talk to me about that?
Yeah. So I highly recommend people looking to build a web app that needs memberships to check out Softer. It is just unbelievable. And I believe you've spoken to Miriam, and that's probably the top tool in a couple of categories for me. It's super easy to get started. It's very intuitive, and it has memberships built in. So Webflow, pretty fantastic for really custom and some things that you can't make happen in Softer, especially like nested collections and things like that. So kind of nesting data within data. But yeah, Softer I build in quite a bit. Webflow I build in. I love both of those. My favorite for doing a marketing site is, and that's where my COVID site is today, is UMSO. But web apps, I think the market's starting to expand. I think in 6 months, it's probably going to be pretty crowded. Oh, I've tried Ycode quite a bit too. I really like, with one exception, I really like their product. But I'm still waiting for the product that's going to be right for me, that will allow me to have complex functionality. So Builder and Bubble are really the two there that seem most interesting to me personally. Bubble, half the world loves, and more power to them. I can't stand it. It really frustrates me. Just some fundamental structural issues. I think it's a lot of my designer bias. But Builder's coming along. So I got into their beta like last October or so, and I keep checking back every month or two. So eventually I'm going to find the right tool to do all this complex functionality for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all going to be looking to you about, what's the web app builder for the people that don't like Bubble. We'll all be keeping our ears right on you for that. It's going to be a really, really interesting thing. And I think, that's the kind of a great place. Thank you so much for like rounding up your favorite tools to just end the podcast here for now. But before we head off, what I'd like to do is just, if you could just let us know, where's the best place for people to find you?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this conversation has been wonderful, and I'm so excited this day finally got here. I've been wanting to talk to you, so this was great. Probably the best place to reach out to me is, I'm on Twitter at ccgirl. I am on LinkedIn. I don't necessarily check that every day. And then I do have my own website, carricraver.com, but it's pretty sad. So it does allow you to book a 15-minute conversation with me. So if you're looking to have something built in no-code tools and want to reach out to me, that would be a great place to go to get a link to be able to start a conversation.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us for the podcast, Carri.
Thank you.
Awesome. Right. To all you YouTube live stream watchers, that is not the end. Carri's going to stay with us for a very relaxed, casual chat so that we can be answering all of your questions live. So if you haven't had the opportunity to ask your questions in the comments below, please do now. Our producer, Gabriel, is going to be handing them over to us. If there are any dry patches, don't worry. I have plenty of questions left for Carri. So I'm going to scroll up because we had one kind of like halfway through the discussion, Carri. That was awesome, by the way. It's going to make a great podcast. Okay, doke. Oh gosh, there's actually quite a few. Where do I start? There was one. Okay, cool. So, okay, right. Every time the producer posts a new chat, it goes to the new one. So I'm scrolling up constantly to find this. Right. So the first question, really nice one. What techniques are there to bridge the gap between product and developers when starting to talk about data?
Okay. Yeah, this is something I'm not sure if I necessarily have a specific technique, or if I know any I can recommend, but I think the most important thing and where I find the conversation becomes most useful, most productive for me talking to developers is if I am able to show a specific design section. So if I take, for instance, maybe a card layout of something and I show 2 or 3 examples and I show, let's refer back to that example I was talking about later where I want to show the feature and the one that's best in class, and then a whole grouping of some that are excellent and then all the ones that have the tool. That just makes it very clear how I'm going to do some design details within there. And then especially if I think the way I'm organizing the data is going to be unexpected to developers, which unfortunately I often do. So that's where I always start. I just kind of think, oh, okay, this is going to be unexpected. Let me put it in front of them and make sure that that makes sense to them. And half the time they'll say, okay, yeah, this kind of breaks our system in some way, or we're not set up for that. And let me think about it. And then sometimes they'll say, yep, no problem. So I'm not always great at knowing as a designer what's going to be expected and unexpected from developers. But I'd say just start having the conversations about how you're thinking about the data.
Yeah, I mean, that's great. I mean, just one thing that we've been doing, because I have a small product studio as well. We build apps with developers, and I actually bring the UX on first. So I actually get them to do the whole user storyboarding on Figma and wireframes first. And then we give that to the dev team, and together we figure out how the database should be structured to enable that user story.
That's wonderful. Yeah, do that if you can.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not quite sure why we start with databases. Why don't we start with customer experience? Because if we start with customer experience and then figure out the data we need to collect to provide the optimal customer experience, surely we'll design with the customer at the center, which is what we're all supposed to be doing.
Yeah, and Nocode lets us do that much more.
Yeah.
Then say, for instance, at one point I was working on a big fintech product or a big healthcare product. They couldn't, if they had started the dev after we did the whole product, the product would have taken much, much longer to build. So we kind of had to build in parallel. So it sometimes depends on the scale of the product you're building, but I think no-code tools are also making the builds faster. So, now we don't necessarily have to start the teams is so much in parallel.
And that rolls really nicely on our next question from Francis Bordeaux. Lovely name. Do you see more tools that build on databases like Airtable popping up? For example, Softer, Pori are just 2 examples. Can you?
Yeah,
have you seen any others?
I think this space is going to explode. I have seen a couple of others. I can't think of them off the top of my head right now that are really impressive, but
Stacker's one.
Oh yeah, Stacker. I've used Stacker quite a bit.
Yeah, so had invested in Stacker. They've actually, so they integrate with Airtable, but they've just launched a beta that actually takes into account Google Sheets as well.
Okay. Yeah, Stacker gets really, they're like $300 a month. So that one I tend to spend less time in once you want to launch, but they let you build for free until you're ready to launch. So I've spent some time learning it. But that one, I just don't quite understand their pricing model. But I can't wait for the day that Airtable comes out with something native to their product that lets you design pages. But we'll see.
I mean, have you heard from anyone at Airtable that they're doing that, or is that just a hunch?
No, yeah, I don't know that they're doing that. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked. They do have their page designer in their apps section, and they have all the money in the world. I think at this point they have like a billion, anyway, a bunch of money. I know they've gotten some recent funding. And it just seems like a natural step they might take at some point, or at least something that a lot of their customers would love. Even if it's an additional fee, not just part of the regular pricing, but it's part of what you purchase on its own. That would, to not even have to get into another tool, would make me really happy.
Because I think we all struggle with the amount of different subscriptions that we have to different tools. And
oh my gosh,
when you find a product that you love, you're willing to kind of pay that little bit more and that little bit more for that one product, rather than having, distributed funds where you don't, managing subscriptions all over the place.
Exactly. Yeah. I am starting to try and recommend tool sets to people. And the one thing that I've done is curated SaaS web apps. And I actually make 3 recommendations. And one of them is Webflow plus MemberStack plus JetBoost plus Airtable plus Power Importer. So you have to use 5 tools just to get what Softer and Airtable gives you, or Bubble and BillFlow. Like, those are my 3 kind of equivalent recommendations. And I think there are completely different reasons why people should choose each one. But like 5 tools, it's ridiculous. I wish that Webflow would buy MemberStack or one of the other membership ones and JetBoost and just make it part of the product.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving them ideas already, I'm sure, if someone's watching from their team. But yeah, I think, reflecting back on the conversation that I had with Ben from MakerPad like a couple of weeks ago, and now he was talking about how no coders are kind of getting into this space of over engineering their products, rather than looking for kind of like, what's the easiest, fastest, quickest way to get this off the ground. I think we have a lot to learn from each other on that as well.
Yeah, that's easy to do right now.
So we have a next question, and another great one from Chat Hall, who asks, is freelancing your current job, or sort of what's your current, money situation?
Yeah. So for the past 6 years, I've done design services under UX Design Cravings, which was my branding for my design services business. Now I'm starting to get to do some no-code work, which makes me really, really happy.
Yeah.
When I get to
no-code freelancing.
Yeah, getting paid to be in Webflow makes me much happier than getting paid to be in Figma these days, because I actually have something at the end to look at.
Wonderful. Oh, talk to me more about this. How did you find these opportunities to freelance in no-code?
Yeah, so I'm just starting to get these opportunities, and they've come from Twitter. So yeah, that's pretty much been it. I need to work on my own branding. I either need to adjust my UX Design Cravings website, and but again, yeah, this is the marketing side, and I'm terrible at it. What I'd done for 6 years was go to meetings in person for design services stuff, and so like that all went away. And
but that's what Twitter is. What I would say is, don't overcomplicate it. You'll probably find that a lot, and you'll be getting inbound inquiries because you're behaving like the way you do on Twitter. I invited you here because I resonated with so many of the things that you were discussing on Twitter. And I'd say this to a lot of people, is that you don't need to have, it's great to have a portfolio website, but what's more important is to be engaging in conversations regularly, like you would do if you were going to regular meetings or meeting people in the hallway or going down the local pub or, the local business entrepreneur club. Like, just behave the same way you would in real life on Twitter, and you will see those inbound leads coming.
Yeah. I should mention that that I am interested in and can do no code work as well there, which I don't really ever do. So yeah, just some big oversights.
Yeah, I mean, to
Oh,
be
well.
honest, we're all rubbish at marketing ourselves. Even I struggle with myself because
Oh, your branding is amazing. I love seeing how you post. You do, yeah, I look up to you.
Oh, bless you. Well, I love your database and product stuff. So there we go. We work perfectly together.
Yay.
Okay, right. How are we doing? Okay, we have a few more questions. Oh, this is a great one. Francis is on it. Okay, Carri, how do you explain Airtable to people who aren't technical?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, these days we're all kind of technical. I wouldn't try explaining it to somebody who doesn't have comfort using their phone and their email and things like that. But this is a perfect example. My mom, she doesn't understand the file system on her computer, or she often struggles with it. She'll be asking my dad, how do you do this or whatever? How do I find this file? It disappeared. And breaks my heart. But I created an Airtable for her business, and she loves it. And actually I created one. She's a writer, she's a novelist, and I created one for her to put her information about her characters. So instead of actually trying to explain Airtable to her, what I did was I asked her about what she was doing, and then I built an Airtable for her that she could use. And then she just started adding not only data to it, but she added some columns. And then when she needed some help structuring things because she had set up her data in ways that was kind of duplicative and not exactly helpful, then I kind of explained those specific things. So I guess that's my exact strategy is don't try and explain the whole concept. Just give them something that's going to help them and then explain that.
So then my question to you, Carri, is how would she explain it to you? Did she say this is like so-and-so? Did she reference it?
No, I mean, she just says it helps her with her writing. That's how she explains it. It just helps her stay organized. So she sees it as a system where she can keep all of her notes, her characters and plots and all that kind of stuff. So I don't even know if she'd call it a database. I mean, I would think she calls it her, the place she organizes her writing.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great insight that you've just pulled out there, is to focus on the value first. Like, what's the value return that somebody is going to get from using it, not what's the functionality. Because highly technical people, we are looking for something that has the functionality for what we already have in our head. We are specifically looking. The average person is looking for something that solves their problem. In her mind, her problem was, I'm a writer, I want to be organized, I need something, a platform that's going to better organize my writing, my characters, and my links. And you could probably just say, oh, I could give you something that does that. And you wouldn't even need to say that it was a database or explain how it works. Like, most people don't care how things work. No one cares how the internet works. People care that the internet allows us to do stuff like this. We don't ask what the back-end database structure of YouTube is. We just say, well, YouTube allows us to be here to talk. I'm on Riverside now. I'm not going to delve into the technical side of like exactly what Riverside is.
Yeah.
It lets me do this with you.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we overthink.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, I love the idea of me trying to explain what Airtable is to my mom. Her eyes would glaze over in 2 seconds. She'd be like, okay, don't care. I mean, she wouldn't say those words to me, but she'd be like, all right, well, that's nice. Yeah.
Awesome. Great. I'm just having a look just to see if we have any more questions. Oh, I've got a few replicates here. Right, we probably have time for only about about 1 or 2 more. So if you want to bring in your questions, please do. Oh, okay, yep. So, Francis is on it again. Great, Francis. Keep asking great questions because you really are asking great questions. So I also would like to ask this question to you. Why should I use Airtable versus Google Sheets?
Yeah. Okay. I like this question quite a bit. So there's some specific reasons I would recommend somebody use Google Sheets. And that is if you really have location data that you want in a single field. That's the single reason I would recommend Google Sheets over Airtable. Actually, maybe there's two reasons. If you want to use Glide and you want to build in Glide, it right now only connects to Google Sheets. So I would recommend it there. Pretty much any other circumstance, personally, I recommend Airtable just because I like the user experience. And I feel like most people who care about user experience much at all will like it better. Yeah, I call Google Drive the place where files go to never be found again. So I also don't like that Google Sheets puts things there. I feel like Airtable, I always know where stuff is going to be. And but I'm not sure that they have any data types that Google Sheet doesn't, or I honestly haven't spent a lot of time in Google Sheets in the last number of years. So I can't say how specifically it's better. It's one of those things, it's better. Like just the little details.
Well, I suppose we could ask, how is it better than Excel? You know, that's another question.
Yeah, the way that the different data types are so easy to access, and that you can just connect the rows, look up rows and things like that, look up records. Like it's way better than Excel for me for that kind of stuff.
Yeah. I like it because, of course, you say the lookups and the rollups. Also, just being able to kind of like tag individual users and people and seeing like faces of people and little bits and pieces like that, I really like from
the card gallery view, all the views that you can create. And I know they're constantly trying out updates. Oh, the forms. Oh, yeah. And you can connect forms to like Google Forms to Google Sheets and Excel, but oh my gosh, the Airtable forms. And now that Tally Forms integrates directly with Airtable, so now you can take your Airtable and have it styled in a way that is less clearly Airtable by connecting it to Tally Forms. So I'm loving that. I'm working on some things that way right now too.
That's interesting. I mean, the limitation that I'm struggling with on Airtable, and I don't know if you can answer this or not, is the fact that in the forms, there's not sort of a unique identifier that you can use that means that if somebody fills out the form with a specific email, that their data will be specifically updated to their existing record. Is that something that you know how to solve?
Well, yes and no. Okay, so I do, there's a guy I work with that we're starting to do Ask a No-Code. Oh, wait, no, this is No-Code and Beyond on Wednesdays. And I think Bentley Davis is his name. He's like me. He's been doing startups forever. He's had a couple successful exits. He's a great developer. And he and I were talking about this very problem maybe 6 weeks ago. But maybe that would be a good topic for us to do for No-Code and Beyond in a future episode to show exactly how he addressed that problem. I think there is, if I recall correctly, there's an app that you can install as part of Airtable. It's called Mini Extensions, I believe, MINI, not MANY. And it helps you be able to put data to specific records to update things.
Yeah, because at the minute, the only workaround that we're looking at the minute is to potentially use HubSpot forms to onboard people to a CRM system and then attach a Zap to then to focus on specific properties to then upload to Airtable via that way. We're looking at that, which means we'll have duplicates of data, but then, I mean, HubSpot's free up to 1 million contacts and there's no limits like there is on Airtable on the number of like records apart from 1 million. So
1 million. Wow.
I'm probably going to look at sort of hacking that together a little bit.
I wonder if I wonder if there's a way to, because I know you can do hidden fields. I wonder if there's a way that you can put it as part of the URL. If it's something that you're sending somebody specifically, like a profile page or something like that to update, I wonder if you can embed
that's
the
a good point,
details
'cause
as part of the URL. I don't know.
I think you can do that on the forms. I suppose you could pre-select that on a form and hide that, and then it would automatically input with a certain thing tick. But yeah, I'd have to look into that a little bit more. It's just, I mean, for me, a really simple fix would be for Airtable to allow you to create a unique identifier field and decide that that's like, if somebody ever puts that unique identifier in again on any other form, it would automatically like relate it to that, just as a function.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like there is a way. Anyway, I may look into this.
Yeah,
it's a great question, and you can't be the only one focused on that one.
Oh no, I think I've asked like tons of people already. We haven't come up with a solution yet, so I just thought, we ask it here. We forward this video to Airtable, and then we tell them to fix it and to help us out.
Yeah,
so
sounds good.
That's all for questions today, Carri, and it's been an absolute pleasure having you here today on the Launch No Code podcast, and also our live stream here today.
Oh, this was really great. Good questions. You've got a great audience.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's been listening, watching, and engaging. We are going to be sending out the produced videos as well as the produced podcasts very soon, once I have at least 10 in the can and have a decent cadence, because we want to release them once a week. And we're also looking for sponsors. So if you guys know of anybody who would like to sponsor the Launch No Code podcast, please do send them my way. Thank you, everybody, and good night or good morning, wherever you are.